Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Salt Lake City Snowhawks expansion franchise. Our Snowhawks are Super Bowl champions. Where do we go from here? And I'll tell you that we're going into the Year 5 offseason now, and we do have one huge question mark heading into the offseason. It's how and can we even improve this roster? You know, the roster that just hoisted Lombardi Trophy. Most, if not all of our key pieces are going to be kept intact going into next season. We have a very young roster, mostly made up of players we have now drafted over the course of this franchise. Of course, a few key free agent acquisitions as well. But for this offseason, we do have a few tricks up our sleeve. We're going to try and move our first round pick maybe for a difference maker. Quinnen Williams is on the trade block. Dexter Lawrence is on the trade block. And even Maxx Crosby is as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this Year 5 offseason as we set up Year 6, which will be the final season of this expansion franchise. And our first order of business here in this offseason episode is addressing our re-signing. So the first guy we have here on a 5th-year option is Cade Moreland. I believe we drafted him 10th overall back in the Year 2 offseason after a trade down from like 2nd or 3rd overall. And when we drafted him, he came back as the #1 player in that entire draft class in true talent. He was drafted as a superstar development and has maintained that the entirety of this expansion franchise. 89 overall, agile offensive lineman with 97 strength, 70 speed, so a great combo there. And most of the traits are already in the 90s. That pass block power, pass block finesse definitely needs some work, but the run block power at 80 is his biggest blemish. But he has been progressing very nicely already up to pretty much a 90 overall, we'll call him. And he does have a few superstar abilities with run protector, unspun, and fool me once. So I think it said $17 million on the 5th-year option, which is a lot of money, especially for an interior offensive lineman. I wasn't expecting the number to be so high, but we actually already lost in our negotiations here with Randy Samuels, a right guard who has started every year since Year 2. He was part of our inaugural draft class, a 4-year starter out of South Carolina, and we just could not get to an agreement on a contract with him in season, which means this left guard spot is even more of a need. So I think when we do sign Moreland to a more long-term extension, I don't think the number is going to be as high as $17.7 million, but for the time being, we are going to go ahead and accept that option. We have $82 million in cap space, so we are pretty good from that standpoint, and even then, I think the Moreland contract, that number won't go up until next season anyway. So that now brings us to Caleb Patton, and he won $75 million on a 3-year contract. He was elevated to superstar development at the end of the season. Prior to that, though, he did have star development his entire career up to this point. Another player who was part of that inaugural draft class, as now they're all pretty much off of their rookie contracts. Looking at his ratings, 86 strength with 75 speed, a good combo there with 94 block shed, 92 finesse move, 94 tackle, 91 play rec. So Caleb Patton, one of the top defensive tackles in all of football, and he actually tied all interior defenders with 16.5 sacks this past season, and he reached a similar mark last season as well. 26 years old out of San Diego State, a former 3rd round pick, I think it was, 3rd or 4th round pick, and his abilities right now are stonewall, goal line stuff, and BOGO. So we're going to go ahead and throw the franchise tag on Caleb Patton because, like Randy Samuels, we could not come to an agreement with him in season, but he is just far too talented, far too important to our team to just let him walk. And that franchise tag is going to cost us over $30 million, which is going to eat up more than a third of our available cap space right now. But like I said, we don't have many holes to fill. So I think looking at like $40-50 million to work with in free agency is definitely more than enough with the team we currently have in place. So that's the first time we've ever applied a franchise tag in this franchise, and that goes to Caleb Patton. And with that tag, he's getting like $5 or $6 million more per year than he was demanding. So Randy Samuels, we already botched our negotiations with him. Depending on who's on the open market, we might even just look to target him in free agency and bring him back. Dontavion Wicks, he had a very good run over the past 2 seasons, but with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Carlos Alvarez, we don't really need to pay him the $8-9 million he's looking for. Instead, we'll go with some of our younger receivers that we have drafted in recent years. And that now brings us to Chauncey Washington at 66 overall. He wants like $4 million per year, which I was not expecting. He's been a very good preseason player for us. 89 speed for a tight end is very good. And when we originally drafted him, he actually came back with hidden development, but seeing as how he didn't really see the field, he went down to normal dev, and he was maybe in a spot where you could work up to be our tight end 2 next season with our departure now of Darnell Washington. But at that demand, I don't know if it's really realistic to bring Chauncey Washington back. It's a very stacked tight end class in the draft as well, and we have our eye on somebody there in the 2nd, 3rd round range who we think is going to be a very good prospect. We'll take a look at our draft board here shortly, but we're still going to throw an offer here at Chauncey Washington, even though this is very low on what he was asking for. But $2.5 million for 1 year, I think, is more than enough. for a 66 overall backup tight end, and he does reject our offer. So, I mean, we could always revisit him in free agency. I definitely like him as more of a fan favorite who, like I said, has impacted the preseason over recent seasons. But the last thing we're going to do is overpay for someone who might not even see the field. Drew Sanders, a very good reserve linebacker, and he does have a lot of interest in rejoining a very good veteran presence there to our linebacking core. 78 overall field general with 84 speed, 85 play rec, and just balanced ratings all across the board. Our linebacking core is set in stone for next year with Quay Walker, Jerry Sexton, and Tashawn Gross, but I do like the depth that Drew Sanders provides. But even then, we do have some younger guys coming up the pipeline that we might want to give some more playing time to. So kind of like Washington, we're going to lowball him a little bit here. He does have high interest in rejoining, so maybe he'll take the bait on a 1-year, $4 million contract, and he thinks free agency will be better for him in the long run. And we also have Jamie McLean, another first-round pick from that year 2 offseason. I think 3 out of the 4 offseasons, we have had multiple first-round picks just are wheeling and dealing up and down the board. Over the first 3 years or so, we had very high picks in the draft, and just a lot of the time, we didn't like any of the players that were projected in that vicinity of the draft. So instead, we elected to accumulate more draft capital and pick someone that we liked a little bit better, who was projected a little bit further down the board. But Jamie McLean, we really just drafted him out of necessity. We really needed an offensive lineman, and he was kind of a bust for us. He's mainly just been our swing tackle, and that 79 strength, a clear blemish. That's something I should have spotted when we were drafting him. The 65 speed as well, very poor, but he is a specialist in pass protection, but that run block finesse at 66, 69 run block power, that is just not going to cut it, and we're definitely not going to pick up that 5th-year option on McLean. And we've had him on the trade block actually the past year or two, but we've had no one bite on it, and that 5th-year option would bring him $16 million, far more than what he's worth. And unfortunately for Jamie McLean, we are going to reject that offer, and he's more than likely going to be playing with a new team, if not this season, after this season. Darnell Washington, we already canceled his contract negotiations. We're set to move on and find a tight end of the future to groom behind Mark Andrews for his final season as a Snowhawk, or at least his final year of his contract. Dak Kitchens has been a fan favorite over the course of this franchise, of course part of that inaugural draft class. Really not demanding much, but he has no interest in returning, unfortunately. And like we did with the other guys, give him a low ball offer at $2.5 million per year, and he's also going to test free agency as expected. We have Kwity Paye here at 82 overall. He was part of that year 2 offseason where we went hard in free agency. We went ham and signed pretty much everybody, and he's been very consistent, very reliable for us with that 85 speed, 86 strength. I love that combination. 86 power move, 82 block shed with good pursuit, good hit power as well. Now up to 30 years old, so he still has a couple more years of youth in front of him, and I did expect to see some regression at this age, but no regression yet from Kwity Paye. We do have a very good defensive end in Taylor Goddard, who came off a 14-sack season as a rookie, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. But Kwity Paye wants $15 million. I think that's a little high. So I think we're going to test the market for an edge rusher and maybe look at someone like Maxx Crosby if we can work a trade with the Las Vegas Raiders. So we're going to pull out right now on Kwity Paye, but we can always revisit him in free agency and see how that goes. Ruke Orhorhoro, a 1-year low-risk signing from this last offseason. He had a lot of flashes with our Snowhawks, but we have Caleb Patton, of course, who we just franchise tagged. We also have now going to be a 2nd-year man, Randy Fisher, who had a lot of flashes. So I think he's ready to be propelled into a more prominent role. And as I said, we want to maybe test the waters at trading for someone maybe like Dexter Lawrence or Quinnen Williams if that opportunity presents itself. So we're going to pull out on Orhorhoro and Kwity Paye, even though there were 2 pivotal pieces up front for us working on our D-line rotation. We have Cottrell Clark, a 1-year signing from last year. And unlike Dak Kitchens, he has a lot of interest in re-signing. So I think we'll throw a 1-year offer at him, low guaranteed money. Again, $2.5 million, and he's not going to re-sign on that. I thought we might be able to get him just because the interest bar was so high, but that's okay. Of course, all these guys, of course, we can revisit once we actually hit free agency. So a few more to go here. Ben Amaro, he was a guy from that inaugural draft class. I think a 5th-round pick out of Buffalo. Another guy like Chauncey Washington, who has showed up in the preseason, but has not had many snaps during the regular season. But again, going to just bring the offer down a little bit. We'll go 3.5 on a 1-year contract for Amaro, and he is not going to sign that. And we have Karan Amagaji here, Colton Miller, Jonathan Grenard, Jalen Thompson, a few veterans, Cooper Hodges, Isaiah Simmons, Will Reichert, Logan Cook. So we're getting there. And Logan Cook was actually very good for us last season. I just want to see if he has suffered any regression to this point. Not that it matters too much for a punter. I mean, he had -2 for kick accuracy and then -1 for kick accuracy. So we'll call it -3 for kick accuracy. I don't know why they split it up like that, which brought it down to an 89. So Logan Cook, I think, more than proved himself last year, especially in that Super Bowl. He was very, very good. So we'll try and get him back on a 1-year contract if we can. And like I said, we'll drop it a little bit. We'll go 2.5 million 1 year, and he's also going to test free agency. And again, we can always bring these guys back in free agency if need be. Isaiah Simmons, he's been a depth guy over the course of this franchise. We'll let him walk, as our linebacking depth is definitely getting a lot better as we've gone on through this franchise. Cooper Hodge is a backup right guard, very low money he's demanding, so we'll go 1.8 million, see if he accepts that, but he does not. And maybe we're just being a little too frugal here, but we're trying to get the best bang for our buck here. At $50 million in cap space, we might just leave it at that. Jonathan Grenard, we're going to let walk, 32 years old. And even though he had a decently productive season in his 1 year in Salt Lake City, Kwity Paye is someone we would have rather to bring back. Karan Amagaji, again, a low-cost backup lineman. Again, we'll just drop the offer a little bit, going 2.5 million. He is going to decline, which I think leaves us now with Colton Miller, which is a tricky situation because we do not have a left tackle after him. We have Jamie McLean, who we saw is really not starting material, and Colton Miller, I was expecting some regression from him, but not the case. We traded for him, I think that was the year 3 offseason, and we traded Trey Benson over to the Raiders. We brought in Colton Miller, and he's been our starting left tackle the past 2 or 3 seasons, whatever it was. And honestly, the ratings are good despite up and down tenure here with the Snowhawks, but I think we'll let him walk as well. I'm expecting Jordan Mailata to hit the free agent market, and if that's the case, we're definitely going to make a run at him, as he would present a tremendous upgrade at the blind side. Jalen Thompson, a captain for us since being drafted in the dispersal draft. He was one of 2 players we got from the Cardinals roster when we inherited this expansion team, and from that process we inherited the Cardinals rookie class, and we also drafted 2 players from that team in the dispersal draft. So Jalen Thompson, thank you for your service. You were one of the OGs, but we're ready to move on. We also now have one of the best young safety tandems in the entire league. So we now have Will Reichert, our last player we have to re-sign. He won $6 million per year at the kicker spot, and he honestly was amazing for us, but that is just too much to pay for a kicker. Especially, we're looking to bring in some big names, so that would diminish our cap space a little bit, but we'll throw him this offer. 2 years, $9 million $9 million collectively, and he says he would like to play for a new team next year. So that is going to be re-signings this year. We already took care of a few key pieces in season. I think Matthew Torrance was the headline there, safety, who now is up to an X factor, but we were able to put the franchise tag here on Caleb Patton, and we were able to pick up that 5th-year option on Cade Moreland, who is already one of the best interior offensive linemen in all of football. So before we actually advance to the free agency stage, we actually do have to fill our coordinator spots, because both of our coordinators were hired as head coaches, and we'll just take a look at the news feed right now and see how the coaching carousel played out this season. At the top here, you see our franchise tag on Caleb Patton, the 5th-year option we picked up on Cade Moreland. The Bills re-signed Josh Allen to a 1-year, $58 million contract. I was going to see if he hit free agency. I'm pretty sure Jalen Hurts is going to be a free agent, so we'll see where he signs. The Bengals do re-sign Trey Hendrickson, someone we would maybe target in a trade, but that is not going to be the case anymore. The Chiefs re-signed George Karlaftis to a 3-year, $78 million contract, someone we were going to target in free agency. He was actually one of our top targets, someone we were going to look at to maybe replace Kwity Paye. So the Chiefs get him back. And Andy Reid also retired, so the Chiefs are going to have to fill that head coaching vacancy. The Colts re-signed Quentin Nelson. Eagles re-signed Landon Dickerson. But I don't see Jalen Hurts up here, and I do not see Jordan Mailata, so I think both of those players are going to be on the open market. Some more 5th-year options up here, and the Bengals re-signed Travis Weldon. He was another guy I was looking at. He was from our year 1 draft class, or maybe that was the year 2 draft class, and he's already emerged as one of the best tight ends in football. He actually led the NFL in catches last season and costed our very own Carlos Alvarez a triple crown there, as he was like 3 short on the catches, but did lead in receiving yards and touchdowns. Byron Snow, the Seahawks picked up his 5th-year option, which is going to be over $52 million. He was the number 1 overall pick from that year 2 offseason. Definitely a future MVP, we think. This Thursday we signed TJ Watt, and now we're getting into the coaches here. So the Ravens signed Dennis Allen to be their OC. I'm pretty sure he's a defensive-minded coach, and the Chiefs sign head coach Dan Quinn. So Dan Quinn goes from being our defensive coordinator to defeating the Chiefs in Super Bowl 63, and he is now going to be the head coach succeeding Andy Reid. The Cowboys hire Shane Steichen as the OC. The Packers hire Sean McVay as the OC. Like, we can't get these guys any head coaching jobs here. The Jets signed Mike Tomlin to be their offensive coordinator, which makes absolutely no sense. He was fired by the Steelers, but why would he take a coordinator spot with the Jets nonetheless? And he's a defensive guy. Why is he being hired as an offensive coordinator? You gotta love the Madden logic. The Saints hire Robert Saleh as their OC again, another defensive-minded coach who is being hired as an offensive coordinator. And the Patriots hired Brian Callahan, who served as our offensive coordinator. So we lose both coordinators to head coaching spots, which I was very worried about because we did pour a lot of skill points into our coordinator positions, which provided big boosts skill-wise to a lot of our players. And we're actually getting up on cuts now. We'll see if any big names were released here. Ray Davis, Rashid Shaheed from the Rams. He tore us up in a few games. The Panthers released quarterback Rashawn Rice. He was a second-round pick out of Purdue just maybe 2, maybe 3 seasons ago. Jermaine Johnson cut from the Jets. Evan Engram cut from the Jags. Any other big names here? Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor have both been cut by the Indianapolis Colts. And of course, we're a few years along here, so these guys are a little bit older than they are in present day. But still, I think Jonathan Taylor might be able to offer something to our team. Troy Franklin was cut by the Broncos. He actually made the Pro Bowl with them last year, one of the biggest surprises in all of football. Cortland Sutton also cut, so they cut their top 2 receivers. Not sure what they're doing there in Denver. And then just punters, kickers here. Zaven Collins cut from Chicago. DeAndre Swift cut. And then we get into the retirements. Really, Laramie Tunsil and Daniel Hunter were the biggest names that retired player-wise. But of course, we mentioned that Andy Reid retired along with Joe Thuney there of Kansas City, Chris Godwin and David Njoku, a couple other big names there that retired. So now we have to replace Dan Quinn and Brian Callahan, which I really didn't want to do. I could have settled maybe losing one of them, but not both of them. And it really just reminds me of the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago in present day against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they would go on to lose their offensive coordinator, and it was just shambles their offense was after that. So you know, no real-life guys here. I was hoping for a real-life guy that we could fill the spot with, but all these guys are going to be generated coaches, and none of them really have any talents either. It looks like here Wade Bridges has 1 talent. We have Harry Greer here, Jarrett House, Walker Weiss, Nick Gregory, Brian Warner. I mean, it's really just a crapshoot. I don't think it matters too much who we go with. Looking at Jamie Rodriguez here, he has 2 points there for pass blocking for tight ends, and then going to halfback guru, getting the ability to equip X factors on the offensive lineup. So, I mean, don't we already have that? Like, if they're an X factor, isn't that already going to be allowed to be used on this guy? We have power running, so that's run blocking boost for the tight ends, and he also has the X factors on the offensive lineup as well. Nick Gregory, he has 3 talents under offensive line guru, which I really do like. If I could put skill boost into any position, that is the unit I would pour them into. But all these guys say offensive coordinator. What if we go over here to DC, and there's not even a single defensive coordinator on the market, which doesn't make any sense, and I'm kind of at a loss right here. I think Nick Gregory is the guy just because he has those 3 offensive line abilities. Walker Weiss has some there, and Nick Gregory has a vertical zone running scheme, and on defense he runs a Tampa 2 with the Lions playbook and the Indianapolis Colts playbook on defense. So we're going to go ahead and just hire Nick Gregory as offensive coordinator, and now let's look into a defensive coordinator. Okay, that makes more sense. I guess we were just looking to hire an offensive coordinator, so it was just showing us those candidates, but at this point we only have 2 to choose from. They made it a little bit easier for us. We have Sammy Rios here. He gets awareness to defensive line and linebackers, and also has the X factors for defensive backs. And now Scott Anderson, he has 2 boosts here to the secondary, which I do like, awareness for safeties and corners, and X factors on the defensive lineup. So it really comes down to scheme. Scott Anderson, a 3-4 under guy. Sammy Rios, a 4-3 quarters guy, and we're more of a 4-3 team, so we're going to go ahead and hire Sammy Rios. So we do get a bunch of skill points recouped for hiring them, so we're up to 193 now, which we're not going to really worry about at this point. We're now going to go ahead and advance to the free agency stage, and at this point, most of our top free agent options were re-signed, so we're really just hoping for Jordan Mailata, maybe Brian Burns as an upgrade to our pass rushing after losing Kwity Paye and Jonathan Grenard. But without further ado, it is now time to unveil this free agency pool that we're going to be dealing with here in year 5. I mean, I don't expect too much of an impact. Like last year, we signed 20 free agents, including Terrion Arnold and Creed Humphrey, some big names there at the top of the market, but also a lot of guys to come in and fill depth roles, compete in the preseason, and many of them honestly didn't even end up making the final roster. But now at this point, we have a lot of young guys that we've drafted, a lot of practice squad guys who are ready to inherit some depth roles on this team. So I don't expect too active of a free agency, but we do have our big names that we're going to target. And right at the top here is Jalen Hurts, and he already has 11 teams interested. We'll see where he ends up. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Raiders, the Carolina Panthers, and of course a handful of other teams have already expressed interest. George Kittle at 35 years old, an X-Factor tight end still, and he's still at 91 overall, looking for a 2-year contract, and he already has 2 offers on the table. Frank Ragnow, a center, actually has a lot of interest, but we're set at the center position, had already signing Creed Humphrey last year, and we see Jordan Mailata, our top target on the market this year, 32 years old, 88 overall left tackle. Of course, came over from Australia, 7th round pick that the Eagles groomed into an all-pro left tackle. 88 overall, 6'8", 365 would just be a mammoth there at the blind side, protecting Lucas McDonald. 88 strength, and all the ratings here in the high 80s to mid 90s, and he's only asking for a 1-year contract, and he would be a phenomenal upgrade at left tackle spot from Colton Miller. With 11 years playing experience, it would be great to pluck him from the Philadelphia Eagles, as they have emerged as one of our biggest rivals, having defeated them in the NFC Conference Championship the past 2 seasons. Brian Burns is also up here, a superstar at right outside linebacker, now having lost Kwity Paye and Jonathan McGrenard. We do need to get a running mate there with Taylor Goddard, and we were going to explore the possibility of probably trading for Maxx Crosby, and I did have a few backup plans in place as well, but Brian Burns, still one of the premier pass rushers in all the NFL, 87 speed, 88 finesse move with 93 pursuit, but he is demanding a lot of money. And Jordan Mailata, I forgot to look at what he was demanding. He wants $26 million a year, already has 2 teams interested, and again, with no interest in joining our team, we're gonna have to up the offer probably to at least like 28, 29, maybe even $30 million if we want to bring him to Salt Lake City, which would cut into our $50 million of available cap space at the moment tremendously. Brian Burns wants a little bit less than Mailata, and he might be more worth it, although left tackle is much harder to come by than a premier pass rusher, especially because there are a few other guys on the trade block, including Trayvon Walker from Jacksonville, Will Anderson from Houston, and we see a few corners here, Marshawn Lattimore, Marlon Humphrey, Jalen Ramsey, all these guys now 33, 34 years old, but they can still make an impact on the team. All of them want a 1-year contract. Elgin Jenkins, left guard here, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, Dre Greenlaw, a lot of guys here in their 30s, so not a lot of young free agents really hitting the market. A lot of kickers and punters here, as we do see that it is a fairly weak crop of free agents, which really just leads into my opening point even more, that we're probably just going to maybe throw an offer at Mailata and call it a day here in free agency, because we have a lot of draft picks as well. So with mostly all of our starting spots filled, we really don't have to spend too much time here in free agency. But we do see Jalen Hurts is the top quarterback on the market. Emmett Dalton, former 2nd round pick of the Cleveland Browns out of Miami. He spent the last 3-4 years there as the starter. Darren Anderson was actually the top quarterback selected from our year 1 offseason, but he didn't quite pan out there with the Las Vegas Raiders, who are now probably in on the Jalen Hurts bidding war, and they have been among the worst teams over the course of this franchise. So just really makes it all that more realistic that they would look to trade someone like Maxx Crosby. Corbin Childress, I remember him as a former high draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kyler Murray spent the first 5 years of this franchise with Tennessee. He is now a free agent, as is Jared Goff, but I believe the Lions drafted the successor last year. That was Glenn Shelton, a 2nd round quarterback out of Nebraska. He's likely going to take over as the starter. But like I said, we're not going to spend too much time here in free agency. We'll go by position and just see who the top guys are. Johnny Tatum, a generated player over the course of this franchise, which we are going to now start seeing, as a lot of those first-year draft picks from our year 1 offseason are going to start hitting free agency off of the original rookie contracts that they had signed. Ray Davis, Jonathan Taylor here now just down to 78 overall. He does have a lot of interest in joining our team, but we're already pretty crowded in the backfield. Carson Steele, we signed him to a 1-year deal last year, but didn't even make the team. He was beat out by 6th round pick Manny Reynolds, going over to receiver. Dontavion Wicks, the former Snowhawk, spent 2 years with us, was very good over the course, but he's going to be replaced by one of our young guys who we drafted in the 3rd round pick a couple years back. Emmanuel Rhodes, I remember he was a top 5 pick of the Cleveland Browns out of Michigan, much like Braylon Edwards back in the day, Trey Tucker, Traylon Burks. So really weak, really at every position. Tight end, though, George Kittle could definitely make a difference for a year or two. Cade Otton, Carlos Morales, a star tight end here at just 26 years old, but the tight end draft class is absolutely stacked. We have our eye on a very good target who graded out as a round 1 guy, despite being a projection in the rounds 3 to 4 range. That is Roosevelt Howell. We will take a look at our draft board here shortly, but before that, we're definitely going to throw a deal here at Jordan Mailata. Again, like I said, we are going to have to up the ante, just because he really has expressed no interest in joining our Snowhawks, despite defeating his Philadelphia Eagles in back-to-back seasons on the big stage. So right now we're at 1 year at $27 million. I think we'll go all the way up to 28.5. Sent him that offer, and I really like it on a 1-year contract, because it's not a long-term commitment. That contract will be off the books by next season, and we'll see where that offer put us, as we are currently trailing the Cleveland Browns. They're the front runners right now, and I'm not going to manipulate the system too much, but I will just up the ante one more time. We'll just go to $29 million even, and we'll leave it at that for Jordan Mailata. Hopefully going to join our Snowhawks, because he is absolutely what we need at this point, but that would only leave us with $21 million in cap space, so I don't even know if we'd be equipped with the necessary cap room to explore a trade for Maxx Crosby, but we will definitely see what our options are after this first phase of free agency. A couple decent left guard options here. Elgin Jenkins, who we saw, Damian Lewis, and then it gets a little bit weaker as we go down. Artie Trefto, 76 overall, just 24 years old. He does have interest in joining, but already has an offer. And again, Mailata and maybe like a pass rusher are the only contracts we're going to issue because we really don't have to do too much here. A lot of centers here have interest. Tyler Biadasz, Drew Dahlman, right guard. Will Hernandez, actually have a selfie from him from back in the day at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile, Alabama. Randy Samuels, the former Snowhawk, and I would throw an offer at him to retain him, but we're really scraping in terms of cap space at this point if we want to make a run at someone like Maxx Crosby or even one of our reserve options there, like a Will Anderson. So I don't really want to offer anybody else besides Mailata at this point. Really, our big needs to address our left tackle, D end, and right guard, which we can accomplish either in free agency or in the draft. So not too much pressure there, especially if we're able to land Jordan Mailata. Kwity Paye, we can always explore bringing him back on a cheaper contract if we're unable to bring in a better pass rusher via trade. Ruke Orororo here had a phenomenal season with our Snowhawks, but not going to be able to retain him as he definitely earned a bigger contract going over to right end now. Jonathan Grenard, we'll see where he ends up after a decently productive season in Salt Lake City. Zaven Collins here only wants $5 million per year, was drafted by, I believe, the Chicago Bears in the dispersal draft going back to when we set up this expansion team. Had 7.5 sacks last season, 6.5 the year prior, 8 the year before that, and then 13.5 between the first 2 years of this franchise. So he's been insanely productive there with the Bears, showcasing some good pass rush capabilities. So maybe a sleeper that we look to bring in with 84 speed, 75 strength could definitely play up there on the line with 81 block shed, but the power move only at 75, the finesse move in the 60s. So maybe not the best case there, but does have decent attributes as an off-ball guy. So we'll keep his name in the back of our mind for now. Only $5 million, not really asking for much, but again, we really can't afford to dish out much of anything extra aside from what we're already offering to Jordan Mailata. So Brian Burns probably out of the equation for us. If we're going to upgrade our pass rushing unit, it's going to have to come via trade or in the 2029 NFL draft, I believe that we're now in. Going over to corner, we already saw Lattimore, Humphrey, Ramsey, all these guys looking for like one final run, it seems. Travarius Ward in that same mind of frame here at this point. We also have some decently young corners here. Antonio Whitfield, Dontre Franklin, guys who have been drafted over the course of this franchise. But it looks like a very saturated position with a bunch of guys here in the 80 overall to high 70 range. But we're already pretty set at the position. Some safeties here. Jabril Peppers, now 33. Geno Stone, the top free safety. And we have Budda Baker, who was the #1 overall pick from that dispersal draft to the Atlanta Falcons. He's now on the open market at 33 years old. 4 teams in on him at this point. He went to a 1-year contract. So, like I said, free agency is not going to be the most exciting that we've seen in this series, but at least if we can get Jordan Mailata and acquire a big-name pass rusher in a trade, that's really all we're looking to do leading up to the draft. So, we're going to go over to our targeted negotiations here, and we're going to skip an eval period. And it looks like Jordan Mailata already has signed, and he has not signed with our Salt Lake City Snowhawks, unfortunately. He has signed with the Cleveland Browns, and that is very unfortunate. It looks like they got him in on a 1-year, $26.2 million contract, which was almost $3 million less than what we offered him. But it looks like for some reason he really wanted to go and play with the Cleveland Browns. George Kittle also signed. He's going to be a New York Jet. They signed him to a 2-year contract, and they're definitely living up to that mantra of signing big-name free agents at the end of their career. Frank Ragnow going to be a Los Angeles Ram as he joins our division, and Brian Burns also signed. He's going to be a New England Patriot as they look to bolster their front 7, and they also had one of their former first-round picks on the trade block, Leonard Bailey, DN from USC, who was a top 5 pick, but just really hasn't panned out with the Patriots. Maybe we'll be in on him. DJ Reed goes to the Steelers. Brian O'Neill also to the Cleveland Browns. So they signed 2 offensive tackles, and we'll see if they can bring in Jalen Hurts because they're definitely in on his bidding war as well. So back to the drawing board now. Jalen Hurts now has 12 offers on the table, but most of these big names have already signed after the first phase of free agency. And let's go back over to offensive tackle. Is there anyone who is worth bringing in? I mean, we could bring back Colton Miller. We were really looking to upgrade the position, but missing out on Jordan Mailata was definitely a heartbreaker. Demario Cook signs with the Las Vegas Raiders, one of the younger top tackles on the market. We have Jedrick Wills Jr., who does have interest, along with Wanya Morris, but none of these guys really present that upgrade I was looking for. What at right tackle? I mean, it's probably not much better. O'Neal has already signed. We have Spencer Brown, Braden Smith. I don't think he's ever really played left tackle, though, in the league. Deontez Cheeks signs with Buffalo, one of the younger tackles here on the right side. So if we want to improve our tackle spot, we might have to look at the trade market. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in the draft. Not for this season, at least. I was really hoping we could sign Mailata and then draft somebody fairly early to groom behind him and then take over in the following season. So definitely missed out there, which we maybe could have went towards Brian Burns had we known that we were going to miss out on Jordan Mailata. So I think we'll just keep it going here through the first phase. Ruke Orhorhoro is going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after a very good season in Salt Lake City. Grenard is still on the market. Zaven Collins is still on the market. We definitely could afford to go that route, but at this point, I'd honestly rather just look at a trade and see if we can bring in one of those big names we were talking about. Ideally, Maxx Crosby at this point, but we might want to look at a team to see if we can bring in maybe even an offensive tackle via trade. And I did go ahead offline and look at some potential trade options, and there weren't many. Offensive tackle is definitely one of the weaker positions league-wide, so it was a struggle to find a team that would be a realistic trade candidate, but we are going to explore that. But before that, we will sim through this entire phase of free agency. As we harped on, we don't have many targets that we're going to prioritize here, especially in the early stages. So we have 2 more eval periods, which we will just skip ahead. And really, the free agent pool right now, we're really just waiting for Jalen Hurts. I mean, other than that, there's really no marquee names besides a bunch of older veterans who are mainly just going to go to their next destination on a 1-year contract. So, like I said, we will just sim ahead through this eval period, and we are going to see where Jalen Hurts ends up signing. Still, after that second eval period, he is still on the market. 12 teams have offered him a contract. Pretty much half the league right now is in on Jalen Hurts. After that third eval period, he still has gone unsigned. So throughout this entire first phase of free agency, Jalen Hurts is still on the market. And now we'll go to the second free agency phase, and we will advance the week. We're now here into the second phase of free agency with Mock Draft 5 fresh off the press, but we're not going to go into the NFL draft class quite yet. We will look into that towards the end of the episode. I'm not sure if we're going to squeeze in the NFL draft in this episode. It depends how long the conclusion here of free agency takes, and also we're going to try and make that trade for that premier offensive tackle, which we're going to get to promptly after deciding where Jalen Hurts goes. So 11 teams now interested. Looks like 1 team pulled out, and we'll sim this eval period, and Jalen Hurts signs with the Cleveland Browns. So he follows his left tackle there, Jordan Mailata, and that might have been the plan all along, as Mailata and Jalen Hurts reunite there with the Cleveland Browns, as Jalen Hurts signs a 3-year contract at $168 million, as he's going to carry the torch there for Cleveland, hopefully lead them to the promised land. And it's worth noting that in this point of the franchise, Jalen Hurts still has not won a Super Bowl ring. We're still on Madden 24 here, so that season that the game was released, that was when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, but going back to year 1, it was the Baltimore Ravens. So Jalen Hurts still seeking that first Super Bowl. Now the top quarterback on the market is now Emmett Dalton, who was the quarterback for Cleveland, drafted by them in the 2nd round on Miami going back a few years ago. Darren Anderson was a 1st-round pick going back to the year 1 offseason. He has 1 offer. Emmett Dalton currently has 2 offers. Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, the 2 veterans on the market with nothing on the table quite yet. Sam Darnold, the veteran quarterback who does have interest in joining our team. We might look into that depending on how much money we acquire in a trade there, as we only have $50 million in cap space. Dontavion Wicks goes back to Tampa Bay. Of course, he started his career as a Green Bay Packer, spent a season with Tampa Bay, then signed with us for 2 seasons, and he now signs a 3-year contract to return with the Buccaneers, and we wish him nothing but the best there. Benji Campbell also going to join him. The top 2 receivers on the market go to the Buccaneers at 82 overall. Emmanuel Rhodes signs with the Buffalo Bills. Clayton Barr goes to the Raiders. I remember him from one of the early draft classes of this franchise. We saw Carlos Morales signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Colton Miller is still the top left tackle on the market. So if we strike out in a trade that we're going to look at here in a few moments, we're definitely going to revisit the possibility of just bringing back Colton Miller on a 1-year contract. We see Randy Samuels also signs. He signs with the Minnesota Vikings, a 2-year contract at just over $15 million. So part of our inaugural draft class going back to the year 1 offseason, we wish Randy Samuels the best of luck. He started every game after being drafted, and now will oppose us in the NFC. Kwity Paye now going to the Carolina Panthers on a 1-year contract. We wish him the best. Mozzie Smith going to the Buffalo Bills. Jimmy Perriman going to the Raiders at right, and nothing doing as of yet. Jonathan Grenard also. Jermaine Johnson, he's now 30, but maybe someone worth looking at. Zaven Collins still with no offers. I do like him, especially if we have the cap space to just throw it at him as a do-it-all type of linebacker, someone who can contribute as a pass rusher as well. Drew Sanders also going to follow Randy Samuels and sign with the Minnesota Vikings. He was a top-end backup slash special teamer for us. Dre Greenlaw staying in division, going from the 49ers to the Los Angeles Rams. Marshawn Lattimore returning to New Orleans here for maybe his final season, the team that drafted him. Marlon Humphrey going to Buffalo. Jalen Ramsey going to Tennessee. DJ Reid, who led the NFL in interceptions last year with the Jets. He signs with the Steelers. Jamison McCoy to the New England Patriots. Whitfield also going to the Saints, along with the aforementioned Marshawn Lattimore at safety. Geno Stone going to the Jets, and at strong safety, Budda Baker signs with the Denver Broncos. Justin Reid to the New England Patriots. And looking at kickers and punters, we also need to sign one at each spot. We might revisit signing Logan Cook back, and also at kicker Will Reichert, although he wants a 3-year deal at $18 million, so I don't know if that's going to be in our budget. But as we said, we're now going to try and visit the trade market, and this one I kind of talked myself into. We haven't made many big splashes when it comes to trades, but I think we might be in a position where we can do that. So originally the plan was maybe to trade for someone like Maxx Crosby, but as I was exploring that option, it was apparent that the Raiders wanted way too much than we were willing to offer. And after missing out on Jordan Mailata in free agency, that forced us into a spot where we had to kind of put the precedent on offensive tackle, which I was going to try and pursue. Christian Darrisaw here, of course, one of the best offensive tackles in all of football, 89 overall pass protector, superstar development, and we were ready to offer the Minnesota Vikings a first-round pick and then some, as he has pretty much 90s across the board in all core attributes. But now that it looks like they have $50 million in cap space, when I was originally looking offline, they were in quite a bind when it came to cap space, but I'm assuming they must have had some bids in on some guys there in free agency that just didn't come to fruition, which has resulted in a freeance there of cap space. So I'm not going to force it on Christian Darrisaw, especially the Vikings were a playoff team last season. They did win the NFC North, probably the biggest surprise team in all of the NFL. They did lock up J.J. McCarthy on a 5-year contract. And like I said, I was kind of talking myself into it because they had a decent young offensive tackle behind Christian Darrisaw here in Cole Albertson. And like I said, they must have had a lot of offers in there in free agency that just didn't come to fruition. So Christian Darrisaw, we're not going to force it there on the offensive tackle. We had one other possibility here in terms of trading for an offensive tackle, and that was Darnell Wright here. 1-year contract left on the Chicago Bears, which they were probably the biggest disappointment last season. They finished how we projected the Vikings to finish, and vice versa. And Darnell Wright, very good strength there, but very poor there, pass block finesse. Otherwise, very well-rounded, more of a power archetype at offensive tackle. But instead of trading for an offensive tackle, since we're going to miss out there on Darrisaw, or not really miss out on him, but just forego that possibility of trading for him, we're going to instead pivot again here in free agency. We're going to go towards a pass rusher, which is going to bring us down to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We want someone to play alongside last year's defensive rookie of the year in Taylor Goddard, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have a ton of pass rushers. They have less than $500K in cap space, so definitely a team that needs to get some money off the books, and that's going to bring us to Travon Walker, 2 years left on a very big contract. Of course, the former first overall pick from the 2022 NFL draft, and a very productive career over the course of his career here with Jacksonville. Quick math here is 42.5 sacks over 7 seasons with 52 tackles for loss, and I think he would be a tremendous complement to our Taylor Goddard. Goddard more of a speed rusher, whereas Walker more of a power rusher, which we definitely want to put at the left end spot. 91 power move, the finesse move pretty much non-existent, but when he has that imposing speed and strength with 88 speed, 91 strength, it doesn't really matter. He can just really get by on his physical abilities alone. Still developing at 28 years old with the star development, and I think adding him to the defensive line would just do wonders for our front seven. Last year we worked more of a rotation at DN, but this year, if we're able to complete this trade for Travon Walker, that would give us 2 guys, I think, at the left end and right end spots who would be out there pretty much every down, as they are definitely 3-down players. DJ Carter, they drafted top 5 overall last year, which is another reason I'm going to use to say that they could look to trade someone like Travon Walker. As I said, Carter at the top 5 pick in the 2028 NFL draft out of Clemson, only 1 sack last season as he was sparingly used. They do have Josh Hines-Allen opposite on the right end spot. Jared Tranquil, a former top 15 pick, who they do put up rushing the passer at times, along with Yaya Diaby, who they signed to a big contract a few years back. So we're going to pursue this trade now for Travon Walker, and it just happens to be that their top offensive needs are at the offensive tackle spots, and not even their top offensive needs, but actually their top team needs altogether. If you look at the right side of the screen under team needs, they need a left tackle and they need a right tackle. So that's just perfect, because really our only trade chip at this point is Jamie McLean, who's been a swing tackle after being drafted in the first round a few years back. We just declined a 5th-year option on him, and we've been trying to trade him, but no better deal than to include him in this trade for Travon Walker. But of course, that's not going to get it done alone. What if we throw a 2nd rounder in this year's draft? We'll throw pick number 64, and we'll say a 4th rounder in for next year, and we'll see where that puts us. And we'll send that to Jacksonville. and kind of a little bit higher than I was expecting. Of course, we're going to have to throw in a little bit more. I think we'll make it a 3 for next year and throw in a 5 this year as well. So that's 3 picks altogether, along with an offensive tackle who will probably come in and start from day 1 for the Jags. And it does put the bar up a little bit more, but still not going to suffice. What if we make that 5 a 4 this year? So it'd be a 2 and a 4 this year, and a 3 next year. We'll throw in another late round pick. In this year's draft, we'll throw a 7, and that'll be 4 picks total, along with Jamie McLean, and that still is not going to get it done. So we might have to make it a 2 this year, a 2 next year, and then we'll go off that base and see where that puts us. That might be a better base to go off of, along with Jamie McLean, and that is accepted. So we maybe could have been in a spot where we could have negotiated a little bit better and had given up, as much as we did. 2 second-round picks and an offensive tackle who just really never lived up to that first-round prowess where we drafted him. Probably our only miss there in the first round over the course of this franchise. And what a deal we just made with the Jacksonville Jaguars, bringing in Trayvon Walker. And for all the talk we had, we were saying we might trade our first-round pick to get a player like Trayvon Walker and still have our first-round pick, I think is a great, plan B or plan C, you could even say, that we had entering this free agency this offseason. So now we definitely are going to look at signing Kolton Miller, just bring him back on a 1-year contract. He's experienced, he knows our scheme, and he's been with us the past 2 or 3 seasons at this point. And we'll just go $5 million on the bonus at 2.5 salary for a 1-year, $7.5 million contract. And seeing how we now have an excess of cap space, we can, explore the option of bringing in someone like Sam Darnold, a veteran quarterback who does have experience and he does have interest. So I think we'll offer him a 1-year contract. We'll bring it down a lot though, and see if he can compete for our backup spot, which now puts more pressure on someone like Chris Woodard, who has filled that role for the past couple seasons, but going to have to step it up a little bit and maybe beat out Sam Darnold if he comes in on this 1-year contract. And we might as well explore the opportunity here of signing Zaven Collins. He still does not have an offer, and we'll even look at his player card real quick. A 78 overall run stopper, but can also offer his abilities as a power rusher and pass coverage. So like I said, just kind of a do-it-all linebacker. We saw the production earlier. Very, very good there over the course of this franchise after being selected by the Chicago Bears back in that dispersal draft where we distributed the Arizona Cardinals in place of our expansion team. So Zaven Collins, he wants $5 million. I think we'll, lower that maybe to closer to $4 million, as we're not going to try and overpay any of these guys at this stage of free agency. We'll bring the bonus just down to $1 million even, go 2.8 on the salary. And that's another contract we're going to offer here as like a depth rotational type of guy. And offline, I was, scouring deep into these positions. And at right guard, we're going to look at someone deep down the board here, if he's even still available. And that's going to be Sammy Russell, just wants under $2 million, 25 years old, out of Western Michigan, power archetype, but, very good size there on the inside at 6'5", 345 with 90 strength and 86 lead block with 87 impact block, so don't get him out into space unless you want to get flattened. And for more of a depth development guy, the ratings are decent to work off of, although that pass block finesse is very low, but we're going to offer him like a $1 million contract and see if he wants to come in and compete for a spot in the preseason. We're going to definitely lower the guaranteed money just to $100K. Give him 1.1, and we'll see if that gets the job done. Maybe that'll prompt another team to get in on his bidding war. We had a couple guys offline that I also noted that I wanted to maybe make a run at. We had Darius Hurd, also Sean Davis, and I think there was Alfonso Truman, who we actually did bring in last year in preseason, and he didn't play poorly, but just did not end up making the final 53-man roster. I wouldn't even mind bringing him back for another run. He does have some scheme familiarity, but I think we'll just stand pat with what we have. We do want to bring in another corner, though. There were 2 guys I had noted. We're looking for Carr or Cachell Clark, and they're both right here. Cachell Clark spent last year with Salt Lake City. Kamal Carr was a former Los Angeles Ram, I believe. Looking at the athletics, looks like Clark has the slight edge, better awareness, better play rec, and the coverage ratings, I would say, pretty much better despite a lower press rating. So Cachell Clark, someone who spent the season with Salt Lake City last year, would just offer him another contract here and see if he wants to come back, fill another depth role as he did last year. 1 year, $2.2 million, and we'll offer just one more contract at this eval period. There was an interesting player here at linebacker who I was maybe thinking of moving to strong safety, and that's Jamal Hill. He has 91 speed at 6 foot, 226. Pass coverage archetype here, but with the 82 zone coverage, 80 pursuit, I think he could be a decent fill in there on the back end, maybe more of a depth guy, a special teamer, but I like the versatility and the upside he might present in a spot like that. So we are going to go ahead and offer Jamal Hill a 1-year contract and see if he can earn his keep on this team. He actually wants more guaranteed money than I was expecting, so this might not actually work out at 1 year at just $2.6 million. So I don't know if that's going to do it for him. Very low from what he was demanding. And now with that, we will just go ahead to our active negotiations and we'll sim ahead. We haven't made many offers here in free agency, but of course all these guys really just fill-ins, some depth guys, some guys who are going to try and compete for a roster spot. Kolton Miller, though, will likely be the starter. As we do sim through that eval period, we do get some signings here. Just one from Catrell Clark, and I'm not sure if any of our offers signed elsewhere. That might have been it, and we'll do it again here. And we do get one more signing, it seemed. We got Zaven Collins on that 1 year, just $3.8 million. And I really like that versatile skill set he brings to the table. He can contribute in a bunch of ways. We'll sim the last eval period here in the second phase of free agency, or actually that was the last eval period. So we're going to carry in negotiations to that final phase here with Kolton Miller, Sam Darnold, Jamal Hill, and Sammy Russell. Huge move there, though, trading for Trayvon Walker. Of course, that's going to be the key note here of this episode. We missed out on Jordan Mailata, which forced us into a different position where we had to seek the trade market. So hopefully we can bring back Kolton Miller and just keep in place what we had up front, although we are going to have a big need now at right guard as we enter this 2029 NFL draft. We'll go back to the right guard position and see if anyone's available. I mean, Will Hernandez is still on the market, but I don't know if he's really what we're looking for, especially not a scheme fit, but the skills are all decent, although the finesse ratings and the run blocking is not really going to get it done at this stage. But going back to active negotiations, we will sim ahead another eval period as we're actually just left here with Jamal Hill and Sammy Russell. So we actually got Kolton Miller to sign and also Sam Darnold signed. So now at 32 years old, Sam Darnold going to come over and try and win the backup position here for Lucas McDonald. And I think that's definitely a fun signing at this point. But we are going to offer just 3 more contracts, or I guess a few more contracts. We do have to get a kicker. And with now a little bit more in cap space to work with, we're going to try and bring back Will Reichert for us. He was phenomenal last season and was a big reason in how we were so successful. And a 2-year contract at $10 million. I mean, that's definitely a lot for a kicker. I would feel more comfortable just going a 1-year contract at $5 million. I'm not sure if that's going to really quite do it for him. And now going over to punter, we're also going to try and bring back Logan Cook. He was very good for us as well, and he does not want as much money as Will Reichert. We'll go $2.2 million for Logan Cook. And there were just a few more players on defense, some more depth guys who we can bring in to compete that we do want to give an offer to. One of them here was at left end. At left outside linebacker, but we were going to move him to left end if we can find him here. And I see his name. That's Kyle Calhoun. And we saw him just because he did have interest in joining. He is 25 years old, 6'5", 255. Power rusher out of Clemson, 81 speed, 91 acceleration, 79 strength with good power move and the finesse move and block shed there in the high 60s. So I think someone we can develop and someone who can maybe come in and earn a role. He wants like $2.9 million, but we're going to bring that down quite a bit to 1.6. If he doesn't sign, he doesn't sign, but we'll at least throw the offer at him. And then we had 3 guys here at right end, although one is more of a D tackle. We would move him over. We even saw him a few moments back, and that was Darius Hurd here, 6'6", 318 out of Auburn. And as we do, we're going to bring that guaranteed money far down along with the salary. It'll be $1.6 million. As we say, if he doesn't sign, he doesn't sign. And then we had Alfonso Truman here at right end. We're going to maybe look to bring back. And there's Ben Amaro, part of our inaugural draft class, now a free agent. We're hoping he signs with a new team, finds a new home. And I guess it actually really just comes down to Sean Davis or Alfonso Truman right here. Davis does not have good block shed. I don't actually think we want to sign him. We'll look to bring back Alfonso Truman on a 1-year contract and bring him back for the preseason, $1.6 million. So that's really going to do it here in free agency. We're going to sim ahead, of course, now and see if we can get Will Reichert back along with Logan Cook, some other offers we have on the table right here. So we get a bunch of players to sign there. It seems Logan Cook is coming back. Calhoun signs, Hurd signs, Russell and Alfonso Truman sign. And we still have $11.9 million in cap space. And now just Will Reichert and Jamal Hill with offers. Will Reichert now has signed. So we're going to keep our kicker and our punter intact from last season, along with our left tackle. We traded for Trayvon Walker, and we signed Zaven Collins, Catrell Clark, Sam Darnold, Kyle Calhoun, Darius Hurd, Sammy Russell, and Alfonso Truman. The last few guys here really, just tryouts, and we'll see if they stick. So there's just one eval period now left in this free agency of this year 5 offseason. So I think at this point, we are absolutely done with this free agency. Really not much left to do. We already saw who all the top players signed with. Jalen Hurts goes to Cleveland with Jordan Mailata as they follow each other there. Going over from Philly, George Kittle signs with the New York Jets Frank Ragnow is going to be in our division playing the NFC West with the Los Angeles Rams, and Brian Burns signs a big contract 3-year deal there with the New England Patriots. And now that we've put a bow on free agency, we're now going to shift gears here and dive into the 2029 NFL Draft, starting here with mock draft 5, as the Tennessee Titans are on the clock here at number 1 overall, and they're projected to go wide receiver Nick Freeman out of Clemson. The Titans held the number 1 overall pick back in the year 1 offseason, where they also selected a wide receiver there in Roy McBride out of LSU. So pairing Freeman with McBride would form one of the best 1-2 tandems here at the wide receiver position, at least, for guys that are 25 years or younger. And Freeman had a prolific season there with the Clemson Tigers, tested very well, although, not what you would maybe expect from a number 1 overall receiver, but he has all the traits, and the Titans are electing to go wide receiver number 1 overall instead of quarterback after signing Emmett Dalton in free agency, who comes over from the Cleveland Browns after a productive tenure there as his rookie contract came to an end. Speaking of teams moving on from quarterbacks, the Las Vegas Raiders are moving on from Darren Anderson, number 7 overall pick from the year 1 offseason, and instead they're going to go with Stephen Coles, who is the number 1 overall player on the overall board, and he's a 6'5", 224-pound improviser, only 21 years old, and despite only 3 years there at Pitt, he broke Kenny Pickett's all-time passing record, and you see pretty much A's across the board there for key ratings, although the medium accuracy at a B, but he looks the part. I didn't really dive into any scouting on these top prospects because I knew due to our talent, our draft position would be towards the bottom of the draft, which it is. Of course, we're selecting 32nd overall after winning our first Super Bowl in franchise history, but based on the traits here, it looks like the Raiders might have a franchise quarterback for the first time in a long time, especially after missing out on Jalen Hurts there in free agency. So Cole's the top player on this year's draft board, going number 2 to the Raiders. Brandon Foster, the top pass rusher, going number 3 to the Carolina Panthers. Virgil Martin, the top offensive tackle, going number 4 to the New York Giants. And then rounding out the top 5 is cornerback Kevin Middleton out of Minnesota, 6'4", 201, bringing some long range and length there to the outside for the Bears on defense. Number 6, Ramon Starks, a player we really liked. He can play DN, D tackle, as he tore it up there at Penn State, but we knew he was out of our range, so we don't even have him on our overall board because we're not going to work the board this year. We might trade down from 32 depending on our options, but I don't really see us trading up this year. James Tranquil, a pass rusher there out of Texas A&M, going number 7 to the Patriots. A pass rusher here out of Iowa, going to the Washington Commanders. That's Josh Hurst, another Midwest guy here out of Central Michigan. When was the last time a Chippewa went top 10 in the draft? That's Peter Ross, going to the Seahawks. Then rounding out the top 10, another pass rusher here. That's a run on pass rushers. Make it 5 in a row to close out the top 10 as Drew Kavanaugh projected to the Saints. He had a draft story on him, the impact player out of Michigan. And at number 11, Kevin Charles, a 6'3", 208 wide receiver out of Ole Miss, going to the Lions. Number 12, Wyatt Robinson, offensive tackle, going to the Bucks. And slipping all the way down to number 13 is John McPherson, tackle out of Louisville. And in the early mock drafts, he was projected number 1 overall to the Raiders, but now he slips out of the top 10 altogether. Alex Costello rises a lot, 29 spots up to number 14 now. Pass rusher out of LSU projected to the Jets. Lamar Teal, cornerback out of BYU, to the Steelers at 15. And at 16, Alonzo Williams, another tall, rangy cornerback here, going to Denver. And at wide receiver here, number 17 to the San Francisco 49ers is Brian Tucker, 6'3", 231, and there was a draft story on him. He actually won the Heisman Trophy there with the Wolverines. Their first Heisman Trophy winner since fellow receiver there, Desmond Howard, circa NCAA Football 06, probably the best NCAA football game ever made. Chargers going cornerback here at 18. Ben Bell, offensive tackle, going to the Falcons as they're trying to protect last year's first-round pick Deshaun Montague at quarterback. And at 20, we have Raekwon Greenberry, someone we really liked, but he came back with around 2 to 3 talent, which was below his projection and still being selected in the top 20 out of our range. The Cleveland Browns going offensive tackle there to protect their new investment there in Jalen Hurts. They also signed Jordan Mailata, and it looks like they're going to try and get another bookend there. At 22 is Ed Stockton, a D tackle we did like, but again, kind of like Greenberry, his talent grade dropped after scouting, but we still think he's going to be a good player and definitely out of our range. Selected there at 22 to the Green Bay Packers. 2 tackles here. We have Thomas Falk out of Boston College to the Colts. Brandon Monter out of Kansas State to the Bengals. At 25, wide receiver Jerry Mickens to the Buffalo Bills. And at 26 is Michigan State offensive tackle Matt Skandrick, someone we really liked. Mammoth size there at 6'8", 339, but after we brought him in on our super focused scouting, he came back with around 3 to 4 talent grades, so that dropped mightily from around 1 to 2 projection. And he still might be a good player, but I think selecting someone in the first round, we want them to come back with around 1 or even around 1 to 2 talent grade. Junior Harris, corner out of Memphis, going 27 to the Rams. as we are getting towards the bottom here at 28. Byron Jennings, offensive tackle out of Bama, going to the Baltimore Ravens. Trey Hurst, the top overall player on our board this year. He's off at 29 to the Houston Texans. Defensive end, defensive tackle there for Penn State. Like Ramon Starks going 8 to the Dolphins, Hurst can also just play really anywhere. Josh Jackson, center out of Missouri, going 30 to the Eagles. At 31, they're going center here, the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning AFC champions. And at 32, our Super Bowl champion, Salt Lake City Snowhawks, are projected to go fullback, Deshaun Fleming. And of course, we're not going to go Deshaun Fleming a fullback in the first round. Like I said, we might trade down as we get a look at the overall board here. We said Stephen Coles is the top player in this year's class, projected number 2 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Nick Freeman projected number 1 to the Titans. And then from there, kind of just a crapshoot because we didn't scout really any of these players. Like I said, we knew we were out of the mix for most of the guys towards the top of the board, so we really just poured our resources into guys at the end of the first round or even beyond. But I do want to talk about the quarterback class real quick because we have Stephen Coles at number 1, and then we also have Stephen Colvin, quarterback out of Houston, who has not even been mocked in the first round in any mock draft despite being the 7th overall player on the board. The Raiders, of course, really need a quarterback now that the Eagles lost Jalen Hurts. They really need a quarterback. So we'll see how it unfolds in the first round as far as quarterbacks go, because there's also Kenny Weaver down here at 15, another strong-arm quarterback he had at TCU. And we very well could see only one of these top 3 quarterbacks go in the first round, that being Stephen Coles. But I would not be shocked to see if the Eagles address that need as well. Ramon Starks, we said we were out on him. He was projected in the top 10 there. I think I said 8th overall, but I believe it was actually 6th overall, so a correction there. We did bring in CJ Stanley for a pre-draft workout, and he came back way below what we expected. A round 1 projection, he came back around 3 to 4 talent, so I'm very happy we brought him in and got that uncovered because he did test pretty well, and the ratings aren't all that bad despite the power ratings. They're both at D, but we brought in a few guards here for our late draft scouting, and I'm glad we did because we got a full grade on a couple other guys. Now we'll go by position, and that was Joey Boston, also Matt Minor. He came back with a round 1 grade. He's a power archetype, which does counter our agile scheme fit, but you gotta love those ratings. B for awareness, pass block, and run block. A for impact block, and he's just a load on the line there at 6'5", 345. Started every game there for the Buckeyes during his collegiate career. One of the stronger interior linemen, just under 40 reps. And I mean, he's not the best mover, of course, more of a power archetype, but you gotta love those traits for a guy his size, especially coming back with that round 1 talent grade. So he might be the guy at 32, but like I said, we're in play to trade down, and I really like Joey Bost as well. He's not much further down the board than Matt Minor, and while Minor is a round 1 talent grade, Bost is a round 1 and 2 talent grade, but I think if we're able to trade down a few spots from 32 into the early to mid-second round, Bost might be there for us, where we could also replenish maybe a 3rd or 4th or a 5th round pick as well in the process. So he's definitely a good backup plan to Minor, very well-rounded, and he did test better than Matt Minor, although not as strong as you would expect. But even being an agile lineman with those finesse ratings at A, the pass block power and run block power is at C, so not too low there. So I really like Joey Bost as a scheme fit, someone we can maybe get there in the early 2nd round after a trade down. I don't think there's much more here on the offensive line. At right guard, we did scout CJ Stanley. We also scouted Marlon Rogers, and he didn't come back as good as we thought with around 3 to 4 talent grade despite around 2 to 3 projection. And at right tackle, we had no one. So we'll go to the overall board here. We really want to talk about tight end as well, but I did mention that Trey Hurst was our top overall prospect, and I really like what he brings to the table. Even though he would be a defensive tackle in our scheme, not necessarily our biggest need. I'll take a 4.7 at D tackle all day with 38, 39 bench press reps, and the traits are very good as well with A, block shed and play rec, B, power move and impact block, and that pursuit is going to be A to B, and the finesse move is at C. So like I said, very well rounded. He tested extremely well, so if he's there at 32, he might even be the guy, even though it's not necessarily a top need for us. But now being without a 2nd round pick that we gave away in that Trayvon Walker deal, that would probably force us into a trade up situation in the 2nd round where we would try and get someone like Matt Minor or Joey Bost. But we are expecting Hurst to be off the board when we get on the clock there at 32, so we're expecting maybe Minor or Bost there early on. Ideally a trade down, we can get one of those guys, and then we're going to try and go for either Roosevelt Howell, a tight end out of Ohio State, who around 3 to 4 projection, but look at that talent grade, round 1 to 2, and his traits are just off the charts here. 6'6", 275. He's like an extra offensive tackle out there, but he runs a 4.6. He's pretty strong, a good vertical jump, good broad jump, and pretty good short area quickness, good agility for a guy his size. And look at all the A's and B's across the board for traits. The only D's you see is for spec catch and run block power. Otherwise, everything is pretty much B or an A. And I think just looking at his skills, his testing, you don't even need that, round 1 to 2 talent grade to justify what he would bring to the table. So even though Roosevelt Howell is not the top tight end on the board in this year's class, he's a top tight end on our board, but we really like Junior Washington as well. 6'2", 250 out of Oregon, former 5-star recruit, and he has A for run blocking despite being a vertical threat, which you don't often see. And he also ran in the 4.5s with the top broad jump, the top vertical jump at the combine, and was top 2 in the 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle as well. The catching traits look good, the blocking traits look good, and I think his ceiling might be higher than Roosevelt Howell, but Howell is probably the safer pick, and I think that his size, at 6'6", 275, he's got an extra 4 inches, an extra 25 pounds on Washington, and I think that adds some value to his draft stock as well. But we're not done there. The tight end class is super rich this year, and Roman Saunders is actually the top tight end on the board, but he had a draft story that he showed up overweight at the combine, so of course that hurt his stock a little bit, but still the traits are very good. A for catching traffic, deep route, A to B for catching, decent run blocker, and he tested very well. Probably not as good as Junior Washington, but still I think a good showing there in Indy for Saunders. And like Roosevelt Howell, all the traits really looking to be in the A to B range, so a very rich tight end class. I'm not sure if all these guys, more particularly here Washington and Saunders, are all going to fall out of the first round. I would love a scenario where we can draft, Howell and a guy like Washington or Saunders, but I can't justify drafting 2 tight ends that high in the draft when we have a glaring need at right guard that we have to address here in either Minor or Boss. So we have more tight ends on our board towards the end of the day 3, day 2 periods. So I think the most likely scenario in this year's draft is drafting maybe Joey Bost after a trade down, getting Roosevelt Howell maybe in the second or the late second, early third round, and then going back to tight end probably on day 3. But we also want to draft a defensive tackle in this year's class. If we do miss out on Trey Hurst in the first, which we do expect, we have some decent backup plans going into round 2 or round 3, and Reynaldo Bryson kind of came out of nowhere as our top D tackle aside from Trey Hurst, but Bryson tested pretty well out of Cal here. B for block shed, finesse move, and power move, so very well rounded. Ran a sub 5 40-yard dash with the top 3 cone at the combine. Also has B awareness, play rec, and A impact block. So I think a very well-rounded player with a high floor, but I'm not sure if D tackle is a spot we're going to address that early in the draft, if not, being Trey Hurst. But some other guys here, Clayton Johnson, who's very similar to Bryson, but Johnson more of an imposing pass rusher, whereas Bryson a little bit more well-rounded, but we slightly do prefer him. There's also Carlos Childers here, and he's 6'3", 352, so he's going to eat up like half the interior there with his body alone. 21 years old out of Florida, but the traits are pretty low, so he's going to need some development. But as a 0-tech, a 1-tech type guy, I mean, he definitely can fill that role, as you'd expect from somebody 350 pounds, did not test really well in any category, but he has A for play rec, A for impact blocking, B for hit power, and he came back with that round 1 to 2 talent grade, so that's very intriguing, but I don't know how high of a ceiling he's going to have, but you really got to think twice when you have that concrete talent grade telling you that he's around 1 to 2 talents. So D tackle, I'm not sure what we're going to do there. We would like to draft one in this year's draft, but tight end, guard, those definitely take precedent. And then also Emmett Porter here, another Florida guy, as Childers was from UF, and we have Porter here, UCF. And he's probably the best linebacker in the draft for my money, at least athletically. And you really just got to look at that 40-yard dash, 4.45 at the combine, 4.44 at his pro day. And the pro day numbers really jump off the chart at you. A for man coverage, B for zone, A for catching. So great ball skills at the linebacker position. And he fits that pass coverage archetype very well, which is someone we can use on our defense. Also Aaron Weber here, a fellow Gator here, along with Carlos Childers on that Gators defensive line. He ran a 4.7 as a power rusher, which we do like coming off the edge, and tested pretty well otherwise. Another D tackle here, Lionel Smith out of Wisconsin, who's actually a teammate here of Clayton Johnson, as they made up one of the best D tackle tandems in NCAA this past season. Justice James out of Arkansas, another linebacker of the pass coverage archetype. Maybe a backup plan if we miss out on Emmett Porter, who we really like after the pro day. One of the few defensive backs we have with draftable grades on our board is Jamie Taylor. He forewent the combine, but looking at his pro day, ran a 4.4 flat, good bench press, good vertical jump, and he's pretty well rounded back there on the back end as well, with A hit power, but also B zone, B press, C block shed, and if not at corner, maybe someone we can move over to safety to fill a little bit more depth in that spot. And now we're getting into the round 3 to 4 range, so kind of from this point on, looking at day 3 type guys. Christian Woodyard, linebacker out of USC, and then a couple more tight ends here. And Justin Rogers, a guy I really like, 6'5", 252 out of Alabama. Looking at the key ratings, A for catching and run block, B for catching traffic and deep route. He ran a 4.55 at his pro day, which was the fastest of any tight end. The 20-yard shuttle also looks good, but another guy with very high traits, well-rounded. And, I think a scenario where we draft Roosevelt Howell maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round, we can come back and draft Rodgers maybe in the 4th or 5th round, which would solidify our tight end position for the next 4 or 5 years, as will be set up very nicely following the expiration of Mark Andrews' contract. J.R. Copeland, a guy out of Notre Dame, he's more of a pass-catching threat, whereas Rodgers does bring that blocking ability. A couple defenders here. Demarius Mackey out of Colorado. LaRon Brown out of Alabama, D tackle, came back with around 3 to 4 talent grade, which does match his projection. We have an interior lineman here, Martin Sullivan out of USC. Cam Graham, who won the Buck Buchanan Award as the top defender at the FCS level, finished with 12.5 sacks, 18 tackles for loss. Absolutely tore it up at 6'6", 263. And then 2 more guys here in the round 3 to 4 projection range. Brian Bartlett, linebacker out of Ohio State. And then we have Marcus Dyson, running back out of Michigan, as these 2 players line up against each other a few times at the college level. But Dyson headlines 3 running backs we're really going to look at here towards the end of round 3 or at the start of day 3. As we start here with Marcus Dyson, I don't know if he's the best one, but he does have the best speed, at least at 4.38, the 2nd fastest 40 of all running backs in the class, 5th in the broad jump, 6th in the 40-yard shuttle, has some shake, also has B vision and B carrying. But like I said, I don't know if he's our favorite running back because we have Sterling Pryor here, 6 foot 231 out of Virginia Tech, a power back, B for vision and break tackle. But look at the physicals. At his size, he ran in the 4.4s, posted 30 bench press reps, the highest vertical jump, highest broad jump, and even the 3-cone was a sub-7 as a power back, which is, you'll take that, especially when he's running in the 4.4s. But just a north-south guy pretty much with the A stiff arm, A trucking, F for juke, but has decent vision, good break tackle. Not going to really offer much as a pass catcher, but that combine is definitely talking to me. But I also like Dwayne Gordon a lot as well. We'll just go to the running back position altogether. And Gordon is listed 60 spots below Pryor. But I even might like Gordon more despite not testing as well as Pryor. I think he's more of a complete running back with that A vision, B for break tackle, although the C carrying is down. But at 5'10", 234, runs with a very low center of gravity, ran a 4.47, 30 bench press reps. And like I said, the testing is not on the level of Pryor, but the skills I would say are better than Pryor's with A vision, B for spin move, which was an F for Pryor. And Gordon also has that A stiff arm, B trucking, B break tackle. So we have a few running backs to choose from on day 3, but we definitely want to end up with one of those guys, and probably more preferably Pryor or Gordon, because I think they could both fill out as nice power backs. But now going back to our overall board, we don't have many draftable guys left to talk about, really. There's another tight end out of Notre Dame, Kyle Hedgecock. Like I said, I'm really expecting to probably get Roosevelt Howell on the 2nd or 3rd round. And if we're unable to get someone like Copeland or Justin Rogers as our 2nd tight end, I think Hedgecock on day 3 might be that guy. Britton Mooney, a high athletic, high energy pass rusher out of Georgia. Never really lived up to the hype there in Athens, but the tools are definitely there. Max Allen, a linebacker we really like here on day 3, had a good combine out of Colorado State. And then we have a few more defensive players here. George Diggs at corner. Cordell Patterson, not Cordero Patterson, but we have Cordell Patterson, a linebacker out of Notre Dame we like late on day 3. A couple safeties here, as we only have 4, or actually make it 5 draftable DBs that we have on our overall draft board. I guess we do have solid depth already at that spot, so not a position group we really poured many resources in during the draft process. It's another tight end here, Jonathan Wilcox out of Clemson. A couple receivers here, John Bell, Terrence Cousins, and 3 more players here to round out our draftable prospects, as we have 39 on the board this year. And then I think we have 27 projected undrafted free agents, and we will go through a few of them here. We really like Calvin Hoover, and we might even be willing to draft him in the 5th or 6th round. 6 foot 195 out of Colorado State, zone corner with B zone coverage, ran in the 4.4s. Pretty good strength for a corner, and with that 41 inch vertical jump, that was the highest of any corner in this year's class, and also had a very good broad jump to boot. Good skills here with B tackle, C block shed, B zone coverage. Someone I maybe think we could transition there to free safety with his athletic profile. But speaking of athletic profile, wait till you see this receiver who is projected to be an undrafted free agent. Again, maybe a guy we would look at in the 5th or 6th round, but Jerry Hardison, this dude is an Olympian straight up. We're not even going to look at the traits despite that B deep route, but 4.24 40-yard dash. I feel like we just have to get this guy with a vertical jump just under 40 inches. And he also had the top 3 cone, which will average out at 6.5, and the top 20-yard shuttle at 3.81. So, like I said, he's got to be an Olympian here. Jerry Hardison, A spec catch, B deep route. Probably going to offer some kick return ability. So, I think Hardison, if he's sitting there in the 6th or 7th round, definitely someone we're going to throw a dart at. But Otherwise, I mean, our undrafted class that we're looking at, I don't know how many of them we'd actually be willing to draft. We have another receiver here, Rashawn Parsons, 6'4", 227 out of Cal. He tested pretty well, but brings that physical archetype. We have George Shaw here, tight end out of San Diego State. Decent athlete, you know, didn't test all the best, but very well-rounded and definitely has a role, I think, as like a tight end 3 at the NFL level. And then we have a few offensive tackles here, starting with Sebastian Backus, the Germany import here at 6'8", 379, putting it together there at Oklahoma State. A project maybe in the 7th round, if not as an undrafted free agent. A few more tackles here. Richard Thomas out of SMU. Godwin. He ran a 4.85, one of the fastest tackles in this year's class. Mitch Peters, pass rusher out of Vanderbilt. And then a few quarterbacks here. We're hoping to bring in one of these guys as an undrafted free agent. Will Douglas, scrambler out of Minnesota. We have Anthony Ramirez, strong arm quarterback here, a pocket passer type guy at New Mexico State, 6'6", 243, and he does have elite arm strength. We have here Greg Holt, another scrambler like Will Douglas here, but Holt, a Michigan transfer, went to North Texas, led them to a 10-2 record prior to a blowout loss in the bowl game. We have Alex Porter, which is interesting because you go down a little bit, we also have Charles Porter. Porter was a Gator, and his younger brother here would go on to be a Georgia Bulldog as they joined rival schools. But Alex Porter, the brother here of Charles Porter, maybe two guys we can reunite as undrafted free agents. Porter is a tremendous blocking fullback, very reminiscent of our very own Brandon Davison, who is currently on our roster. Another tackle here, Michael McBride from Purdue, D-tackle, middle linebacker, another D-tackle, Verdon, 5'8", 183 out of LSU, ran a 4.44, and that pretty much does it. At the end of the board, we have John Cash here, tackle out of Kentucky. You know, anytime you see John Cash, Johnny Cash, you got to add him to the board and bring on that ring of fire. Deshaun Fleming, who was projected to us at 32, he's 65th on our overall board, and we rounded out here with DJ Rubin, a punter out of North Carolina. But this year I'm going to leave you folks. Thank you so much for watching. I know it was a long, strenuous episode here getting through free agency. We missed out on our top target there in Jordan Mailata, but we called an audible and we traded for Trayvon Walker. It only took 2 second-round picks and an offensive tackle who really wasn't even going to see the field with us. We made some quality free agent additions, I think, for depth roles, most notably Zaven Collins, who had a very productive tenure there with the Chicago Bears after being drafted by them in the dispersal draft going back to the start of this expansion franchise. We saw Jalen Hurts go to the Cleveland Browns, followed by teammate Jordan Mailata, as the Browns pretty much won free agency, I think you could say. The Titans have the #1 overall pick. They're projected to go wide receiver Nick Freeman out of Clemson, and the Las Vegas Raiders are projected to go quarterback Stephen Coles, who is the top quarterback in this year's draft class. I invite you to come back for the 2029 NFL Draft episode because we put more pieces in place here in free agency, but come draft time, you know, that's where we really build a foundation and continue to build the foundation on a team that went on to win our first ever Super Bowl in just our 5th year of existence. But as always, everybody, it's been real and be well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.